A chilling mystery buried for centuries has finally been solved, where the Black Death truly began. The Black Death was one of history's deadliest killers. For centuries, no one knew where it started, but now science has cracked the code, and the truth is darker than expected. And here's where it gets even crazier. This wasn't just any disease. We're talking about a pandemic so brutal that it nearly erased half of Europe in less than a decade. Between 1347 and 1353, the Black Death, also called the Great Mortality or simply pestilence, wiped out an estimated 50 to 60% of the population. Imagine entire towns vanishing, families gone overnight, and cities transformed into mass graveyards. The thing is, people at the time had no clue what they were up against. To them, it was a terrifying, invisible force, a punishment from above, or some kind of curse. The fear was so overwhelming that society itself began to collapse. And here's the kicker: despite centuries of research, nobody really knew where it all started. That mystery alone haunted historians for more than 600 years. So how did we finally find out? That's where the story takes its first wild turn.
We were actually able to sequence 2 genomes from 2 specimens from one cemetery in northern Kyrgyzstan. And what's really remarkable is that our phylogenetic analysis has shown that the evolutionary position of the strain that was responsible for the death sits right before the beginning of the Black Death.
All right, here's where things really get wild. Turns out the whole Black Death started in Europe thing. Yeah, not even close. The trail actually points way out east, in this almost anonymous patch of Central Asia that everybody kind of forgot about. Picture this: summer of 1886, a bunch of Russian archaeologists poking around near Kyrgyzstan, right by Lake Issyk-Kul. That's Kyrgyzstan now, geography nerds. They weren't out there hunting for the origins of the apocalypse or anything. And nope, they were just poking through old cemeteries, doing their history thing. Then, bam, total curveball. They start unearthing graves left and right, all marked with stones dating back to 1338 to 1339. Now that's nearly 10 years before the plague even hit Europe. And what's carved into some of those stones? Just the most ominous word ever: pestilence. Back then, that was basically the medieval way of saying, yeah, something nasty swept through and wrecked shop. One of the graves even belonged to a guy named Sandmash, who apparently got wiped out by this exact pestilence. The archaeologists did their job, logged every detail, packed up the bones, and shipped them off to St. Petersburg. And then, nothing. Just radio silence. The whole thing gets filed away, forgotten, like some prop in a dusty museum basement. Nobody realized those old bones might be hiding the real smoking gun behind the worst pandemic humanity ever faced. Funny how history just buries its own secrets sometimes.
So now we know for sure that the Black Death actually commenced in the region of Tian Shan around 1338, 1339. So that's a major discovery of my colleagues and myself.
And here's the part that shocked me the most. More than 600 years later, a medieval historian named Philip Slavin stumbled upon those old records. Based at the University of Stirling, he was digging through field notes, excavation diaries, and old maps while researching the Black Death's economic and environmental history. Something didn't add up. In just 2 years, from 1338 to 1339, over 118 people from this small trading community had died. Many of their gravestones explicitly mention pestilence. That's not just bad luck. That's a full-blown mortality crisis. Slavin realized he might be looking at the very beginnings of the Black Death, long before it swept into Europe. But here's the catch. Historians can be convinced by patterns and records, but that's not enough to prove it scientifically. To confirm the outbreak, Slavin would need something far more concrete, a way to test the remains for the actual pathogen. And that's exactly what led him to a team of geneticists who were about to rewrite history.
Plague could get into people's blood and it could turn their limbs black.
Just when it seemed like the story couldn't get any more fascinating, enter modern science. Historian Philip Slavin teamed up with paleogeneticists at Germany's Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology. These scientists had been chasing the plague's origins for years, building a massive genetic family tree of the bacterium Yersinia pestis. They had already sequenced over 1,300 samples from modern and ancient sources: humans, rodents, and even flea vectors. Their data revealed a jaw-dropping event in the early 14th century, a big bang of diversification. From a single ancestral strain, 4 major new lineages suddenly appeared. One of those lineages would go on to trigger the Black Death in Europe and drive plague outbreaks for the next 400 years. Here's the twist: the European strains weren't the original. They were descendants, already mutated by the time the plague reached Europe. That meant the real origin was somewhere else, somewhere that had been quietly hiding this deadly pathogen for decades. And the trail pointed straight back to Central Asia.
Kill 25 million people.
But the proof had to be concrete. To confirm the theory, the team turned to the Kyrgyz graves from Kyrgyzstan. They tested 7 skeletons focusing on the teeth. Why teeth? Because the dental pulp inside can preserve traces of blood-borne pathogens for centuries, essentially nature's time capsule. The results were breathtaking. 3 of the 7 individuals tested positive for Yersinia pestis. The DNA wasn't just plague. It was a perfect match to the ancestral strain that sparked the 14th century Big Bang. This meant that the epidemic in Kyrgyzstan in 1338 to 1339 wasn't just a local outbreak. It was the very source of the Black Death that would devastate Europe within a decade. This discovery transformed a forgotten cemetery into ground zero for one of humanity's deadliest pandemics. A single remote trading community had unwittingly become the epicenter of a global catastrophe, and all of it had been lying dormant in DNA, waiting for science to uncover it. And here's the moment that changes everything. The DNA results didn't just point to Kyrgyzstan, they confirmed it. The strain from 1338 was the ancestral strain, sitting right at the root of the plague's genetic tree. This wasn't just a random outbreak in a remote village. This was the mother strain, the very origin from which every subsequent Black Death outbreak would descend for the next 400 years. Think about that. A single community, a handful of graves in a mountain valley, held the key to understanding one of the deadliest events in human history. It transformed our understanding of the Black Death from a European mystery to a global story that began in the rugged wilderness of Central Asia.
It was one of the worst catastrophes.
So, how the heck did this killer bug make the leap from animals to people? Nature, man. She's got a wicked sense of humor. Around Lake Issyk-Kul, you've got what scientists call a natural plague reservoir, basically ground zero for Yersinia pestis, the nasty bacteria behind the plague. It just chills out there, cycling between marmots, gerbils, and a bunch of other bite-sized furballs. Most folks wouldn't even notice. Here's the kicker: Kyrgyzstan wasn't some backwater hovel. It was actually a buzzing little trade hub on a Silk Road offshoot. Archaeologists have dug up all sorts of loot buried with the dead. Pearls from far-off oceans, coins from ancient Persia, and random Mediterranean trinkets. These people weren't hermits. They were movers and shakers, swapping stuff all over the place. And guess what else was hitching a ride in those caravans? Black rats with plague fleas. The traders, totally clueless, just kept the germ parade rolling west along the Silk Road, infecting one town after another. So, that tiny mountain mess, it quietly snowballed, trudging thousands of kilometers before anybody knew what hit them. The plague just slithered its way toward the Black Sea, and when it finally crashed into Europe, it was pure chaos. Nobody had a clue that a sleepy valley was ground zero for one of history's nastiest pandemics. Then it all goes full tilt. By 1346, the plague was raging hard in the Black Sea city of Kaffa. Mongol armies, already dropping like flies, start lobbing plague-ridden corpses over the city walls. Because, hey, why not pioneer biological warfare while you're at it? Absolutely nightmarish. That gross stunt was just the beginning. Genoese ships loaded with rats and their little flea passengers set sail across the Mediterranean. The fleas couldn't care less. They just hop from rat to rat, and when the mood strikes, on to humans. Europe's medieval cities. They were a hot mess, jam-packed, filthy, and crawling with rats. A germ's paradise. So what started as a low-key outbreak in some mountain nook exploded into a transcontinental death spiral. Slow at first, totally under the radar, but once it got going, it was unstoppable. The world flipped upside down, and honestly, nobody even saw it coming.
The plague is caused by a bacteria called Yersinia pestis, and most of the time humans get it from a flea bite. Back when plague was rampant and there was no treatment for it, plague could get into people's blood.
And here's the part that really hits. A forgotten cemetery in Kyrgyzstan was actually the epicenter of one of humanity's darkest chapters. That remote valley and its trading community unknowingly sparked a pandemic that reshaped economies, altered societies, and even influenced religion across Europe. Whole generations were wiped out, labor shortages changed economic structures, fear and superstition spread faster than the disease itself. And yet, until modern science, the true origin remained a mystery, hidden in DNA and ancient tombstones for centuries. Thanks to the work of archaeologists, historians, and geneticists, we can finally connect the dots. DNA extracted from teeth proved the 1338 outbreak was not just local, it was the mother strain of the Black Death. Science gave closure to a centuries-old question, revealing how one small community set the stage for one of the deadliest events in human history. From a single Kyrgyz cemetery to a global catastrophe, the Black Death's true origin is now unmasked. Science has finally answered history's darkest question, reminding us how small beginnings can change the fate of humanity. So what do you think? Hit like, share, and subscribe for more incredible discoveries.